Today I want to show you something very important when you keep many birds. Welcome back to Birds Aviary. Many people ask me why I keep different birds in separate aviaries instead of mixing all of them together. Here in my aviary I keep many different species including budgies, lovebirds, cockatiels, finches, canaries, Indian ringnecks, Alexandrians, African greys and yellow-headed Amazons. But each species lives in its own aviary, and there are important reasons for this. So in today's video I will explain why separating different birds is very important for their safety, health and behavior. Now let's start with my budgies. Budgies are one of the most popular birds people keep, and many people think because they are small and active, they can live with lots of other birds without any problem. But in my experience, it is always better to understand the nature of each bird before mixing them. My budgies live together in their own aviary because they are most comfortable with birds of the same size, same temperament and similar behavior. Budgies are very social birds. They like company, they like movement, and they enjoy flying together as a group. When they are kept with other budgies, they can behave naturally and feel relaxed in their own environment. One important reason I keep budgies in a separate aviary is their size. Budgies are small parrots, and even though they are active and sometimes confident, they are still delicate compared to larger parrots. If you mix them with stronger birds, there is always a risk that the budgies can get frightened, chased, bullied or even injured. Another reason is feeding behavior. Budgies have their own routine, their own way of eating and their own pace. When birds are kept with larger or more dominant species, the smaller birds may not get equal access to food and water. Even if there is no direct fighting, stress can still happen. Some birds become nervous and stop feeding properly when stronger species are nearby. I also like keeping budgies together because it helps me observe them more clearly. I can watch their behavior, their energy, their bonding and their condition much better when they are in their own group. If I see one budgie sitting quietly, looking unwell or acting differently, I can notice it quickly. That is much easier when the aviary has one main species instead of many mixed birds. Budgies also enjoy flying from perch to perch in a group. When they have their own space, they can move freely, interact naturally and stay active. This is very important for their physical health and mental well-being. In a mixed aviary, sometimes smaller birds become less confident and do not use the space properly. For breeding as well, keeping budgies in their own aviary makes things more controlled. I can manage nest boxes better, I can watch the pairs better, and I can avoid unnecessary disturbance from other birds. If too many different species are mixed together, the breeding environment can become stressful and less predictable. So for me, keeping budgies in a separate aviary is not just about organization. It is about safety, comfort, natural behavior, easier management and giving the birds the right environment for their size and nature. That is why my budgies stay in their own aviary with other budgies, where they can feel secure, active and settled. Now let's look at my cockatiel aviary. Cockatiels are very different from both budgies and lovebirds. They are generally calmer birds and they have a more gentle personality compared to many other parrots. Cockatiels are known for their friendly nature and their relaxed behavior. They enjoy flying, sitting on high perches, and often you will see them quietly observing everything around them. Because cockatiels have this calm personality, I prefer to keep them in their own aviary. When birds with very different energy levels are mixed together, sometimes the environment becomes stressful for the calmer species. For example, if cockatiels were placed with more aggressive or territorial birds, they might feel uncomfortable and avoid certain areas of the aviary. This can affect their feeding, their confidence and their general well-being. Cockatiels also like space for flying. They have long wings and they enjoy gliding from one perch to another. In their own aviary they can move around freely without being disturbed by more dominant birds. Another reason for separating cockatiels is their peaceful behavior. Cockatiels usually avoid conflict. If another bird becomes aggressive, cockatiels will normally move away rather than fight. Because of this, they can sometimes become victims if they are kept with stronger or more territorial species. Keeping them together with other cockatiels helps create a peaceful environment where they can behave naturally. You will often see them resting together, flying calmly around the aviary and sometimes communicating with soft calls or whistles. Cockatiels also have their own feeding habits. They prefer eating calmly and slowly. In mixed aviaries with more dominant parrots, smaller or quieter birds sometimes struggle to access food trays comfortably. By giving cockatiels their own space, I can make sure they have the right environment, proper feeding areas and plenty of room to fly and rest. Another benefit is observation. When cockatiels are kept together, it becomes much easier to monitor their health and behavior. If one bird starts acting differently, it is much easier to notice. For anyone keeping cockatiels, it is always important to think about their calm nature and their need for a peaceful environment. That is why here at Dreambirds Aviary, the cockatiels have their own aviary where they can stay relaxed, active and comfortable. Now let's move to the lovebird aviary. Lovebirds are beautiful and very interesting parrots, but their behavior is quite different from budgies. Many people think because lovebirds are small parrots they can easily live with other birds, but in reality lovebirds can be quite strong and sometimes aggressive. That is one of the main reasons I keep lovebirds in their own aviary. Lovebirds are very territorial birds, especially when they form pairs. When they choose a partner, they become very attached to each other and they often defend their space. If other birds enter that space, lovebirds can become protective and sometimes chase or bite the other birds. Because of this behavior, mixing lovebirds with smaller birds like finches or canaries can be dangerous. Lovebirds have a strong beak, and even a small fight can cause injury to delicate birds. Another important thing about lovebirds is their personality. They are very confident birds. They like to climb, explore, chew and interact with their surroundings. When they are kept with their own species, they feel comfortable showing these natural behaviors. If they are mixed with birds that behave differently, it can sometimes create tension in the aviary. Some birds prefer quiet spaces, while lovebirds are usually more active and sometimes noisy. Keeping them together with similar birds helps keep the environment balanced. Lovebirds also form very strong pair bonds. You will often see them sitting close together, grooming each other and staying side by side for long periods. This is part of their natural behavior and one of the reasons people love keeping them. In a dedicated lovebird aviary, I can observe these behaviors more clearly. I can see which birds have formed pairs, which birds are more dominant and which birds prefer certain areas of the aviary. Another reason I keep them separate is feeding and nesting. Lovebirds can become very protective of food areas or nest boxes during breeding season. If other birds are present, they might chase them away or create stress inside the aviary. By keeping lovebirds together in their own space, I reduce these risks and allow them to live more naturally. They can climb, fly, interact and build strong pair bonds without disturbing or harming other birds. For me, this separation is not just about organization. It is about understanding the behavior of each species and giving them the environment where they feel comfortable and secure. So here in Dreambirds Aviary, the lovebirds have their own aviary where they can behave naturally and live peacefully with birds of the same kind. Now let's look at my finch aviary. Finches are very different from parrots. Even though they are small birds like budgies, their behavior, lifestyle and needs are completely different. Finches are very delicate birds. They are light, fast and very active flyers. Most finch species prefer living in peaceful groups where they can move freely and feel safe. Because they are so small and fragile, it is very important that finches are not kept with larger parrots. Even if a larger bird does not mean to harm them, the difference in strength can create serious risk. Parrots have strong beaks and a much more dominant personality compared to finches. A small disagreement or curiosity from a parrot could easily injure a finch. Another reason I keep finches separate is their behavior. Finches are constantly moving, flying and interacting with each other. They like open flying space and many small perches spread throughout the aviary. They also feel safest when they are surrounded by birds of the same species. When finches are kept with similar birds, they behave naturally and remain active and confident. If they are placed with larger birds, they often become nervous and spend more time hiding instead of flying and exploring. Stress can affect their health and reduce their natural behavior. Finches also have their own feeding habits. They eat small seeds and prefer feeding areas that are designed for small birds. Larger parrots can easily dominate these feeding areas if they share the same space. Another important point is breeding. Finches often build small nests and prefer quiet environments during breeding season. If they are constantly disturbed by larger birds moving around the aviary, breeding can become difficult. By giving finches their own aviary, I can create a calm and safe environment where they can fly freely, interact naturally and behave the way they would in the wild. This helps them stay active, healthy and stress-free. So here in Dreambird's aviary, the finches have their own space where they can live comfortably with other finches. Now let's look at my canary aviary. Canaries are very special birds and they are quite different from both parrots and finches. One of the main reasons people love canaries is their beautiful singing and calm personality. Because canaries are peaceful birds, they need a quiet and relaxed environment. That is one of the main reasons I keep them in their own aviary. If canaries are placed with very active or aggressive birds, they can easily become stressed. Stress can affect their behavior, their health and especially their singing. Male canaries are famous for their song. They sing to attract females and also to communicate their territory. When they feel comfortable and relaxed in their environment, their singing becomes stronger and more frequent. But if there are too many disturbances in the aviary, they may stop singing or become quiet. Another reason I keep canaries separate is their feeding behavior. Canaries prefer smaller seeds and they usually eat in a calm way. Larger parrots often eat more aggressively and can dominate feeding areas, which can make smaller birds uncomfortable. Canaries also enjoy having space where they can move peacefully from perch to perch. They are not as fast or energetic as finches, but they still like to fly short distances and stay active throughout the day. Breeding is another important reason for keeping canaries in their own aviary. During breeding season, female canaries build small nests and need a calm environment to raise their chicks. If the aviary has larger or more dominant birds moving around constantly, the female may abandon the nest or become stressed. By keeping canaries together in their own aviary, I can give them a peaceful environment where they can sing, feed and behave naturally. It also allows me to observe their behavior more carefully. I can easily see which birds are healthy, which birds are active and which birds may need attention. For me, providing the right environment for each species is very important. Every bird has its own nature, its own behavior and its own needs. That is why my canaries stay in their own aviary here at Dreambird's Aviary. Now let's move to the Indian ringneck aviary. Indian ringnecks are much larger parrots compared to birds like budgies, finches or canaries. Because of their size, strength and personality, they need a very different environment. Ringnecks are intelligent, active and sometimes quite dominant birds. They have strong beaks and they are very confident in their behavior. This means they cannot safely live with smaller birds. Even if a ringneck is not trying to be aggressive, the difference in strength can easily cause problems. A ringneck's beak is very powerful, and even a small bite could seriously injure a smaller bird. Another reason I keep ringnecks in their own aviary is their personality. Ringnecks are curious birds. They like to explore, climb, chew and move around the aviary. They also like to claim their favorite perches and areas. If they share space with smaller birds, they might chase them away from food trays or perches without meaning to harm them. But this behavior can still create stress for the other birds. Ringnecks also enjoy having plenty of space to fly and move. They are very active parrots and they benefit from a larger aviary where they can stretch their wings and stay physically active. Another important factor is noise and communication. Ringnecks are quite vocal birds. They use loud calls to communicate with each other and sometimes to respond to activity around them. Smaller birds like finches or canaries prefer calmer environments, so mixing these species together would not create a comfortable environment for either of them. Keeping ringnecks together in their own aviary allows them to behave naturally. They can interact with other ringnecks, establish their own space and move freely without disturbing more delicate birds. It also allows me to observe their behavior more closely. I can see how they interact, how they use the space in the aviary and whether they are healthy and active. Because ringnecks are intelligent birds, it is also important to provide them with branches, perches and objects they can chew and explore. By giving them their own aviary, I can design the environment specifically for their needs. So here at Dreambirds Aviary, the Indian ringnecks live in their own aviary where they have the space, strength and environment suited to their personality. Now let's move to the Alexandrian parrot aviary. Alexandrians are one of the larger parrot species I keep here at Dreambirds Aviary. They are closely related to Indian ringnecks, but they are noticeably bigger, stronger and more powerful. Because of their size and strength, it is very important that Alexandrians are kept in a suitable aviary and not mixed with smaller birds. Alexandrians have very strong beaks. In the wild, they use their beaks to break seeds, chew branches and climb trees. That strong beak is part of their natural behavior, but it also means they can easily injure smaller birds if they share the same space. Even if an Alexandrian is simply defending its perch or food area, the difference in strength between species could create serious problems. Another reason I keep Alexandrians in their own aviary is their confidence and personality. Alexandrians are intelligent and curious parrots. They like to explore their environment, climb around the aviary and chew natural branches. Because they are active and powerful birds, they need strong perches and plenty of space to move around. If they were mixed with smaller birds like finches, canaries or budgies, the smaller birds would likely feel nervous and uncomfortable. The larger parrots might also dominate the aviary space without intending to. Alexandrians also have their own social behavior. When they are kept with birds of the same species, they can interact naturally and establish their own positions within the group. This helps reduce stress and allows them to behave the way they naturally would. Another important point is feeding. Alexandrians eat larger seeds, fruits and other foods suited to medium or large parrots. Their feeding style is very different from small birds that eat tiny seeds. Keeping them separate allows me to provide the right food, feeding trays and diet for their needs without worrying about other birds interfering. Space is also very important for Alexandrians. They have long tails and large wings, so they need a good-sized aviary where they can move comfortably without damaging their feathers. Here in Dreambirds Aviary, giving each species the correct environment is very important to me. Alexandrians are strong, intelligent parrots and they need space, strong perchers and birds of similar size around them. That is why they live in their own aviary where they can behave naturally and stay healthy. Now we come to one of the most intelligent birds I keep here at Dreambirds Aviary, the African grey parrot. African greys are famous all over the world for their intelligence. They are extremely smart birds with strong memory, problem-solving ability and the capacity to learn sounds and words. Because of their intelligence and sensitive nature, African greys need a very stable and calm environment. That is one of the main reasons I keep them in their own aviary. African greys are quite different from many other parrots. While some parrots are very loud and energetic, African greys are often more thoughtful and observant. They like to watch their surroundings carefully and interact with their environment in a more controlled way. If they are placed in an aviary with too many different species, especially very noisy or aggressive birds, it can create stress for them. Stress is something African greys are very sensitive to. Changes in environment, loud disturbances or aggressive behavior from other birds can affect their confidence and well-being. By keeping African greys in their own aviary, I can provide them with a calm space where they feel comfortable and secure. Another reason is their size and strength. African greys are medium to large parrots with strong beaks. While they are usually calm birds, they still have the strength to injure smaller birds if conflicts happen. At the same time, African greys themselves can also become stressed if they feel threatened by larger or more dominant birds. So giving them their own space helps maintain balance and safety. African greys also require mental stimulation. They enjoy exploring branches, interacting with objects and watching activity around them. In their own aviary, they can focus on these behaviors without constant disturbance. Feeding is another reason for separation. African greys require a balanced diet that may include seeds, pellets, fruits and vegetables. Having a dedicated aviary allows me to manage their feeding routine properly. When I observe them in their own environment, I can also easily monitor their behavior, their appetite and their overall health. For intelligent birds like African greys, the environment plays a huge role in their happiness and well-being. That is why here at Dreambirds Aviary, the African greys have their own aviary where they can feel calm, safe and comfortable. Now we come to one of the most powerful parrots I keep here at Dreambirds Aviary, the yellow-headed Amazons. Amazon parrots are well known for their strong personalities. They are confident, intelligent and very expressive birds. Many people love them because of their beautiful colors and their ability to interact with people. But Amazon parrots are also strong birds, and because of that they need their own aviary space. Yellow-headed Amazons have powerful beaks and very confident behavior. In the wild they live in groups of similar parrots, and they are used to interacting with birds that are similar in size and strength. If Amazons were kept with smaller birds like Budgies, finches or Canaries, it would not be safe. Even a simple disagreement over food or perches could lead to injuries for the smaller birds. Another reason is their personality. Amazon parrots are very bold and energetic. They like to climb, chew branches, explore their surroundings and communicate loudly with each other. Because of their strong presence, they could easily dominate a mixed aviary without meaning to. By keeping Amazons in their own aviary, I can give them strong perches, thicker branches and enough space for them to move around comfortably. They also have their own feeding habits. Larger parrots like Amazons eat bigger seeds, fruits and other foods that are suitable for their size. Having a dedicated aviary makes feeding much easier and more organized. Another important point is observation. When Amazons are kept together in their own space, I can watch their behavior and health more clearly. If one bird is quieter than usual or behaving differently, it becomes easier to notice. Amazon parrots also communicate a lot with body language and vocal sounds. In their own aviary, they can interact naturally with birds of the same size and personality. Here at Lovebirds Aviary, I always try to match each bird species with the right environment. Yellow-headed Amazons are strong, confident parrots, and giving them their own aviary helps keep them healthy, active and comfortable. Now that I've shown you the different aviaries here at Lovebirds Aviary, it's important to understand one of the biggest reasons birds should often be kept separately. And that is size. Bird size plays a very important role when designing aviaries and deciding which birds can live together safely. In my aviary I keep many types of birds, from very small birds like finches and canaries to medium-sized parrots like cockatiels and ringnecks, and even larger parrots like Alexandrians, African greys and Amazons. The difference in size between these birds is very significant. Small birds such as finches or canaries are very delicate. They have light bodies, small beaks and very fine bones. Even a small amount of pressure from a larger bird could cause serious injury. On the other hand, larger parrots like ringnecks, Alexandrians or Amazons have powerful beaks and much stronger bodies. Their beaks are designed for cracking seeds, chewing branches and defending their territory. Because of this natural strength, even a playful or curious interaction could become dangerous for a smaller bird. For example, if a larger parrot became interested in a small finch and tried to grab it with its beak, the finch could be seriously injured. This is why mixing birds of very different sizes is usually not recommended in most aviary setups. Another problem with mixing different sizes is competition for space and food. Larger birds often dominate feeding areas and favorite perches simply because they are stronger and more confident. Smaller birds may become nervous and avoid certain areas of the aviary, which can affect their health and behavior. By separating birds according to size, I can create a safer and more balanced environment for each species. Small birds can move freely and feel secure, while larger parrots can use their strength and space without risking harm to smaller birds. For me, understanding bird size and strength is one of the most important parts of responsible aviary management. Every species has its own needs, and providing the right environment helps keep all the birds healthy and comfortable. Another very important reason I keep different birds in separate aviaries is behavior. Every bird species has its own personality and natural behavior. Some birds are calm and peaceful, while others are energetic, territorial or more dominant. Understanding these differences is very important when managing an aviary. For example, birds like budgies are very social and active. They enjoy flying together in groups and interacting with other budgies. They are generally peaceful birds and do well when kept with their own species. Lovebirds, however, have a very different personality. Even though they are small parrots, they can be quite territorial and protective of their space, especially when they form pairs. If lovebirds are mixed with other small birds, their strong personality can sometimes create conflict. Then we have birds like cockatiels. Cockatiels are usually calm and gentle birds. They prefer a peaceful environment and often avoid confrontation. If cockatiels were placed in an aviary with very aggressive or dominant birds, they might become stressed and uncomfortable. Larger parrots like ringnecks, Alexandrians and Amazons also have their own behavior patterns. These birds are intelligent, confident and sometimes quite bold. They like to explore, chew branches and claim their favorite perches. When birds with very different personalities are mixed together, the aviary can become unbalanced. Some birds may become dominant while others become nervous or stressed. By separating birds according to their behavior and temperament, it becomes much easier to maintain a peaceful environment. Each species can behave naturally without feeling threatened or disturbed by birds with very different personalities. This also makes it easier for me to observe their behavior and ensure they are healthy and comfortable. For anyone keeping birds, understanding behavior is just as important as understanding size. When birds are placed in the right environment with compatible companions, they are much more likely to stay calm, active and healthy. Another important reason I keep different bird species in separate aviaries is breeding control. Many birds naturally breed when they feel comfortable and safe in their environment. When birds are mixed together in the same aviary, breeding can become unpredictable and sometimes stressful. By keeping each species in its own aviary, it becomes much easier to manage breeding behavior. For example, birds like budgies, lovebirds and cockatiels often form pairs and start breeding when conditions are right. If there are too many different birds sharing the same space, the breeding pairs may become disturbed. Other birds flying around the nest area can cause stress for the parents. This may lead to abandoned eggs or chicks, or sometimes even aggressive behavior as birds try to protect their nests. When birds have their own aviary, they can build nests and raise chicks in a calmer and more stable environment. It also helps me monitor the breeding process more easily. I can check nest boxes, observe the parents and make sure the chicks are developing properly. Another reason for separating species during breeding season is to prevent competition for nesting areas. If different birds try to use the same nest boxes or spaces, this can lead to fighting or injuries. Each species also has slightly different nesting preferences. Some birds prefer nest boxes, while others prefer nesting baskets or natural materials. By organizing aviaries according to species, I can provide the correct nesting environment for each type of bird. Breeding is a very delicate stage in a bird's life, and creating a peaceful environment helps improve the chances of healthy chicks and successful breeding. That is why managing breeding through separate aviaries is an important part of how I run Dreambirds Aviary. Another very important reason I keep different birds in separate aviaries is health and safety. When you keep many birds, one of the biggest responsibilities is making sure they stay healthy and protected from unnecessary risks. Different bird species have different diets, different habits and sometimes different health sensitivities. When too many species are mixed together in the same space, it can become harder to manage these differences properly. For example, small birds like finches and canaries eat much smaller seeds and require feeding areas designed for delicate birds. Larger parrots like ringnecks, Alexandrians or Amazons eat larger seeds, fruits and other foods suited to their size. If all these birds were placed together in one aviary, feeding could become difficult. Larger birds might dominate the food trays and smaller birds might not get enough food. Another important factor is hygiene and disease control. When birds live in organized aviaries with similar species, it becomes easier to monitor their health and spot any problems early. If one bird looks unwell or behaves differently, it is much easier to identify and respond quickly when birds are grouped by species. Separating birds also helps reduce stress. Stress can weaken a bird's immune system and make it more vulnerable to illness. When birds feel safe and comfortable in their environment, they are more likely to stay healthy. Safety is also a major concern in mixed aviaries. Even birds that normally behave peacefully can sometimes become territorial or protective of food, perches or nest areas. By organizing aviaries according to species, size and behavior, I can reduce the risk of conflicts and injuries. It also makes daily management easier. I can provide the right diet, the right environment and the right level of care for each group of birds. Running many aviaries requires attention and consistency, but creating a safe and healthy environment for the birds is always the top priority. Here at Dreambirds Aviary, every aviary is designed to give each species the best conditions for their health, safety and well-being. So as you can see here at Dreambirds Aviary, each type of bird lives in its own aviary. This is not just for organization. It is mainly for the safety, health and comfort of the birds. Different birds have different sizes, personalities and needs. Some birds are very calm, while others are more active or territorial. Some birds are small and delicate, while others are strong parrots with powerful beaks. By giving each species its own space, I can create a better environment where the birds can behave naturally and live more comfortably. It also helps me manage feeding, breeding and daily care much more easily. Running many aviaries takes time, patience and consistency, but seeing the birds healthy, active and comfortable makes it very rewarding. Bird keeping is not only about having beautiful birds. It is also about understanding their behavior and giving them the right environment to thrive. Here at Dreambirds Aviary, I always try to make sure every species has the right space and conditions for their well-being. I hope this video helped explain why I keep different birds in separate aviaries and how important this is for responsible bird keeping. Thank you for watching Dreambirds Aviary. If you enjoy aviary life and bird keeping, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you in the next video.